welcome to Springfield Career Insights. Tonight, we interrogate the hidden fracture between private vows and public dignity. Is a marriage that corrodes the soul merely personal, or does it bleed into professional survival? We explore how toxic unions, sworn in intimacy, can dismantle careers, erode sovereignty, and compromise the dignity of institutions. In this episode, we ask, what does a sovereign exit look like when the vow itself becomes a prison? Should professional clarity bow to private loyalty, or must dignity prevail as the higher covenant? We are joined by His Excellency Dr. Godfrey Gandawa, President of Springfield Research University, legal advisor, and architect of Education 6.0. His work reframes survival not as endurance of toxicity, but as sovereign reclamation of dignity. Welcome, President. We are honored to host you.
Thank you, advocates. At Springfield, we believe that survival must be sovereign, anchored in dignity, liberated from toxic vows, and accountable to the clarity of professional purpose.
Thank you, Professor. Professor, how do you define a toxic marriage from a legal and civic standpoint, not just emotional?
Thank you, advocate. So, a toxic marriage is not merely the battleground of emotions. It is the collapse of covenant, the corrosion of contract, the betrayal of civic dignity. From a legal standpoint, it is toxic when vows become chains, when rights are denied, freedoms are curtailed, and dignity eroded. When partnership mutates into exploitation, coercion, or abuse. And the law must intervene, not to sanctify love, but to protect liberty. From a civic standpoint, it is more than private pain. It is a fracture in the nation's moral architecture, breeding broken citizens, wounded children, diminished communities, where the family, society's first parliament, collapses into tyranny. A toxic marriage is defined by the systemic erosion of dignity, equality, and freedom, when the home ceases to be sanctuary and becomes a site of oppression. A marriage is sacred only when it protects freedom. When it destroys freedom, it ceases to be a marriage. It becomes civic decay.
Thank you, Professor. Why do so many professionals stay silent about toxic unions, even when their careers are visibly affected?
Thank you, advocate. So, silence is not always consent. It is often captivity. Professionals remain muted not because they lack words, but because they fear the cost of speaking them. From the legal lens, silence is born of liability. To expose a toxic union is to risk litigation, reputation, and the collapse of contracts. The law meant to protect liberty can sometimes intimidate those who seek it. From the civic lens, silence is born of stigma. You see? Society often treats the broken marriage not as a wound to be healed, you see, but as a shame to be hidden. That's professionals cloak their pain, lest their dignity be questioned, their careers diminished, their futures mortgaged. From the personal lens, silence is born of fear. Fear of losing children, fear of losing status, fear of being branded as weak in a world that worships appearances. But silence is not neutral. It corrodes. It erodes careers. It fractures communities. It normalizes oppression. So every unspoken truth becomes a civic wound. Every muted cry becomes a national decay.
Thank you, Professor. What are the early warning signs that a marriage is descending into toxicity?
Thank you, Advocate. The descent into toxicity does not announce itself with thunder. It begins as whispers, as shadows, as fractures too small to notice, until they become storms that consume dignity and destiny. So the early signs are these: isolation, disguised as love. When one partner begins to sever you from friends, mentors, and networks, the union is no longer sanctuary, it is captivity. Secondly, control disguised as care. You see? When schedules, ambitions, and choices are dictated not by shared vision, but by insecurity, sovereignty is already under siege. Third, ridicule disguised as humor. When constant belittling corrodes confidence, the marriage is no longer partnership, it is sabotage. Four, financial captivity. When earnings are seized, decisions coerced, or resources withheld, liberty itself is mortgaged. Fifth, moral corrosion. When dishonesty, indulgence, or neglect are normalized, the union has become a breeding ground for decay. These are not mere quarrels. They are early fractures in sovereignty, signals that the home, which should be a fortress of support, is becoming a parliament of obstruction. A marriage that descends into toxicity does not only wound the heart, it wounds the citizen, the professional, the nation itself.
Thank you, Professor. How does emotional suppression within marriage translate into stress, depression, and civic decay?
And thank you, Advocate. So emotional suppression is not silence. You see? It is suffocation. It is the burial of truth beneath duty, the masking of pain beneath performance. And what begins as private concealment soon erupts into public collapse. At the personal level, suppression breeds stress. The body becomes a battlefield of unspoken wars, blood pressure rising, sleeping collapsing, health eroding. Depression follows, not as weakness, but as the inevitable consequence of carrying invisible chains. At professional level, suppression corrodes clarity. The leader who cannot speak at home cannot lead in the boardroom. The innovator who hides wounds cannot invent futures. Careers falter, visions dim, destinies starve. At the civic level, suppression becomes decay. Broken homes breed broken citizens. Silent unions breed silent communities. A nation that normalizes suppression is a nation rehearsing oppression. So, thus, emotional suppression is not merely a private tragedy. It is a civic wound. It transforms the home from sanctuary into prison, the citizen from visionary into captivity, the nation from sovereign into fragile. So a marriage that demands silence does not protect love. It mortgages liberty. And every suppressed emotion is not just a personal loss. It is a civic fracture.
Thank you, Professor. Let's take a break and listen to a song called Lutando Lwakho.
I was a verse without a rhythm, a line that didn't land, but you sang me into meaning with no script in your hand.
You didn't ask me to perform, you just hummed me into form, and in your voice I found my name, a melody I now proclaim. Your love, my anthem, rising high, a flag of fire across the sky. Lutando Lwakho, luego Miami. You turn my silence into sound. Your love, my anthem, forever crowned, forever crowned. You didn't wait for crowds to cheer or choirs to approve. You sang me in the quiet and taught my soul to move.
Now every note I ever sing
Carries your refrain. You didn't just love me loud, you loved me into name. Your love, my anthem, bold and free, a sovereign song inside of me. Lutando Lwakho, you made my heart a sacred drum. Your love, my anthem, where I'm from, where I'm from, where I'm from.
Welcome back. Let's continue with our discussion. Can you speak to the cultural myths that glorify endurance over dignity and how they distort marital decisions?
I think you forget. They are myths, ancient and modern, that whisper to us, endure at all costs. They glorify suffering as loyalty, silence as virtue, endurance as strength. But endurance without dignity is not strength, it is captivity. The myth of endurance as proof of love. So it teaches that to suffer is to be faithful. Yet love is not measured by scars. It is measured by freedom. The myth of silence as wisdom. It teaches that to conceal pain is to protect family honor. Yet silence does not protect. It corrodes, breeding depression, decay, and civic fracture. The myth of sacrifice as destiny. It teaches that to lose oneself is noble. Yet sacrifice without dignity is not destiny, it is erasure. These myths distort decisions. They convince citizens to remain in unions that erode liberty, to mortgage futures in the name of appearances, to confuse oppression with devotion. And so, homes become prisons, families become battlegrounds, nations become fragile. Because when dignity is surrendered, sovereignty collapses, advocate. A marriage that demands endurance without dignity is not sacred. It is a civic decay. And every myth that glorifies suffering is a chain upon the future of a nation.
Thank you, Professor. What legal and procedural counsel do you offer to those who feel trapped in toxic unions?
Thank you, advocate. The law is not a distant fortress. It is a shield meant to protect liberty. You know that is right. And when a marriage becomes captivity, the summons is to act with clarity, dignity, and sovereignty. First, document the truth. Keep records of abuse, coercion, and exploitation. In the eyes of the law, evidence is the language of freedom. Okay? Second, seek counsel. Engage legal practitioners like yourselves, civic advocates, or trusted institutions. Silence isolates, counsel empowers. Maybe I should say they must approach your legal clinic. Third, activate procedure. File for protection orders. Initiate mediation or pursue dissolution where dignity cannot be restored. The law is not only punitive, it is restorative. Fourth, safeguard children. Ensure custody and welfare are secured, for children are not collateral. They are citizens of tomorrow. They must be safeguarded. Fifth, protect professional sovereignty. Inform employers or institutions where necessary so that career momentum is not eroded by private captivity. Because if you don't inform your employers and what, you'll be fighting battles and they think you are being careless, you are lousy, whilst you are facing storms. The counsel is simple yet sovereign. Do not remain trapped in silence. Do not mortgage dignity for appearances. Do not confuse endurance with destiny. The law exists to protect freedom. Procedure exists to restore dignity. And sovereignty exists to remind us a toxic union is not a covenant. It is captivity and violence.
Thank you, Professor. How should institutions respond when individuals disclose marital toxicity? What does a dignified protocol look like?
Thank you, Advocate. When a citizen discloses marital toxicity, the institution is not hearing gossip. You see, it is hearing a civic wound. The response must be dignified, deliberate, and sovereign. First, listen without judgment. The act of disclosure is itself an act of courage. Institutions must receive it as testimony, not as a scandal. You see? Second, protect confidentiality. To expose pain is to risk vulnerability. So a dignified protocol shields the victim from further harm, ensuring privacy is honored as sovereignty. You see? Third, activate support. Legal counsel, psychological care, and professional safeguards must be mobilized. Institutions must prove that disclosure is not the end of dignity, but the beginning of restoration. And fourth, uphold neutrality. Institutions must resist bias, favoritism, or cultural myths that glorify endurance over dignity. So the protocol must be anchored in justice, not tradition. And the fifth, secure continuity. Careers, studies, and civic participation must not collapse because of private captivity. So institutions must guarantee that disclosure does not mean derailment. So a dignified protocol is not paperwork, Advocate. It is covenant. It is the promise that when a citizen speaks, the institution will act with clarity, compassion, and sovereignty. So a nation is measured not by how it celebrates success, but by how it dignifies those who disclose their wounds.
Thank you, Professor. Let's take a break and listen to a song called Nyakutanda, I Love You First.
I knew your name before it was spoken. felt your rhythm in my chest. You were the echo in my silence, the vow I made before the rest. No crowd, no choir, no witness near, just the truth I held sincere. And when the world began to see, I whispered, Nyagutanda, Nyagutanda. When I loved you first, before the light, before the stars rehearsed the night. Nyagutanda, even then, before the world could comprehend. I loved you first, and I still do. You didn't ask for proof or praise, you just stood in quiet grace. And I, the keeper of your name, carried love without a claim. They saw you rise, they saw you shine, but I had loved you all that time. Not for glory, not for show, but for the soul I came to know. I loved you first, before the flame, before the world could speak your name. Nyagutanda, Nyazigale, you were mine in sacred truth. I love you first, and I love you
Welcome back. Let's continue with our discussion. What role should church, society, and family play in protecting victims of toxic unions?
Thank you, Advocate. So, the protection of victims is not the duty of one institution. It is the covenant of all. Church, society, and the family are the three pillars upon which dignity must stand. When they fail, victims are abandoned. When they rise, victims are restored. You see? The church must be sanctuary, not silence. Too often, pulpits glorify endurance over dignity, preaching captivity as covenant. A true church, must defend liberty, must declare that oppression is not holiness, and must shelter victims as sacred citizens of God. Society must be conscious, not spectator. Communities must refuse to normalize abuse, must dismantle myths that glorify suffering, and must treat every victim not as a scandal but as testimony. Society must raise its voice where victims are muted. And the family must be fortress, not betrayer. Families must protect daughters and sons from exploitation, must refuse to mortgage children at the altar of appearances, and must stand as guardians of dignity when unions collapse into tyranny. Together, these pillars form the covenant of protection. Church must sanctify freedom. Society must dignify disclosure. And the family must safeguard destiny. A victim protected is not merely rescued. You see? They are restored as citizens, as professional, as sovereign. And when the church, society, and the family rise together, toxic unions lose their power and the nations regain their dignity.
Thank you, Professor. What are the risks of bottling up marital distress within high-stakes professional environments?
Thank you, Advocate. So, bottling up distress is not containment. It is corrosion. It is the silent leaking of private wounds into public arenas. The slow poisoning of leadership, innovation, and destiny. So, at the personal level, suppressed pain becomes stress, stress becomes exhaustion, exhaustion becomes collapse, the professional body carries invisible chains, the mind becomes a battlefield of unspoken wars. At the professional level, distress erodes clarity, decisions falter, creativity dims, and authority weakens. So a leader who cannot speak at home, cannot command in the boardroom, a visionary who hides wounds, cannot invent futures. At the institutional level, silence spreads contagion. Teams inherit instability, organizations absorb dysfunction, and civic trust is fractured. So the rot of one concealed union becomes the weakness of the entire institution. At the national level, bottled distress breeds civic decay. Broken professionals become broken citizens. Silent leaders become silent nations. And a continent that normalizes suppression rehearses oppression. The risks are not abstract, they are sovereign. Every unspoken cry is a fracture in destiny. Every concealed wound is a mortgage on tomorrow. A professional who bottles distress does not protect their career. You see, they mortgage their nation's future.
Thank you, Professor. What does a sovereign exit look like? Not merely leaving, but recalibrating with dignity and clarity.
Thank you, Advocate. A sovereign exit is not an escape. It is emancipation. It is not the chaos of departure. It is the choreography of destiny. It is the art of living, not as a fugitive, but as a citizen reclaiming sovereignty. We talk of clarity of truth. So a sovereign exit begins with naming the captivity, to declare without fear or disguise that the union has eroded dignity and compromised destiny. Then we talk of dignity of process. It is living through lawful channels, documented evidence, and procedural integrity. No secrets, no scandal, only the discipline of justice. Then we talk of protection of self. What do we mean? It is safeguarding health, identity, and professional momentum to ensure that departure does not mean collapse, but recalibration. We talk of guardianship of children. You see? It is shielding the innocent from collateral damage, ensuring they inherit futures, not fractures. Because our children are important. Then we talk of restoration of vision. It is not merely walking away. It is walking toward the new networks, new clarity, new sovereignty. A sovereign exit is not defined by the door you close, you see, but by the destiny you open. I close that one, but I'm defined by the new door that I will open. It is the refusal to be swallowed by the rots and the resolve to rise into greatness. Closing this one, I'm opening a new one, but I will rise. For living is not the end, it is the recalibration of destiny. And every sovereign exit is a declaration, Advocate. I am not captive. I am citizen. I am free.
Thank you, Professor. How can professionals rebuild their identity and career momentum after leaving a toxic union?
Thank you, Advocate. Leaving a toxic union is not the end of destiny. It is the rebirth of sovereignty. The professional who exits captivity must not merely survive, they must recalibrate, restore, and rise. So, I say, reclaim identity. Begin by naming yourself anew. Toxic union blur selfhood. But rebuilding requires clarity. Write, declare, and embody who you are beyond the chains of yesterday. You see? Then I talk of rebuild networks. Toxicity isolates, sovereignty reconnects. Seek mentors, colleagues, and communities that dignify your voice. Networks are not accessories. They are lifelines of momentum. You see? I talk of recalibrating vision. Careers falter under captivity. After exit, redefine goals with precision. Ask not only what you do, but why you do it. Vision is the compass that restores momentum. You see? I talk about guarding dignity. Do not rush into appearances or hollow triumphs. True rebuilding is measured not by speed, but by sovereignty, the dignity with which you rise. Then lastly, I talk about transforming pain into power. Every wound carries wisdom. Channel the lessons of captivity into leadership, advocacy, and innovation. What once broke you can now build nations. Rebuilding is not a return to what was lost. It is the creation of what was never allowed to exist. It is the declaration that destiny delayed is not destiny denied. For the professional who rises from toxicity does not merely recover, they become sovereign innovators of tomorrow.
Wow, this is amazing. Let's take a commercial break and stay tuned.
At Springfield Research University, we don't teach to pass exams, we encode futures. Grounded in Education 6.0 and powered by STEMmer, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, medicine, and automation, we deliver modular, sovereign learning across undergraduate, master's, and doctoral programs. Explore our prospectus, where every curriculum is designed to stematize every discipline, dignify local authorship, and credential transformative knowledge. Be stematized, be sovereign. Here, knowledge is authored, not borrowed. Curriculum is credentialed, not copied. Every graduate becomes an architect of transformation. With 2 annual intakes, March and September, the path to innovation is always open. From the logic of automation to the soul of indigenous intelligence, SRU is where tomorrow is designed. Springfield isn't just a university, it's an epicenter of epistemic dignity. Join the movement. Study where learning governs itself. Springfield Research University, the globe is here. Where are you?
Welcome back. Let's continue with our discussion. What safeguards must be in place to protect those who choose to live emotionally, legally, and professionally?
Thank you, Advocate. Leaving a toxic union is not abandonment. You see, it is emancipation. But emancipation without safeguards is fragile. So to protect those who choose to live, the covenant of society must rise in 3 dimensions: emotional, legal, and professional. So in terms of emotional safeguards, every departure must be accompanied by sanctuary, counseling, mentorship, community support must be mobilized so that wounds that are not carried are alone. Healing is not indulgence, it is sovereignty. You need support. Legal safeguards. The law must be shield, not spectacle, you see. Protection orders, custody rights, and procedural clarity must be guaranteed. Evidence must be honored, dignity must be defended, and victims must never be forced to back into captivity by bureaucracy. Sometimes we are forced back into captivity by bureaucracy. Professional safeguards. Institutions must ensure continuity. Careers must not collapse because of private captivity. Employers must dignify disclosure, protect momentum, and guarantee that living does not mean losing. Safeguards are not accessories, they are lifelines. They declare to every citizen, your freedom will be protected, your dignity will be restored, your destiny will be preserved. For living is not the end of destiny, it is the recalibration of sovereignty. And every safeguard is a covenant that ensures those who rise from captivity rise into greatness.
Thank you, Professor. How does a toxic marriage erode not only love, but the sovereignty of one's destiny and profession?
Thank you. A toxic marriage is not merely the collapse of affection. It is the corrosion of sovereignty. So it begins by wounding the love, but it does not stop there, you see. It reaches into destiny, it infiltrates profession, it dismantles the very architecture of identity. Love becomes captivity. So affection is replaced by fear, intimacy by manipulation. What should be sanctuary becomes prison. Then destiny becomes derailment. Dreams are postponed, visions are blurred, futures are mortgaged. The toxic union does not simply delay destiny, it devours it. Then there is profession becomes paralysis. Confidence is eroded, network severed, momentum stalled, and the professional who cannot breathe at home cannot innovate in the boardroom. Sovereignty becomes surrender. The citizen who shields dignity in marriage yields sovereignty in life. And when sovereignty collapses in the home, it collapses in the nation. That toxicity is not private. It is civic. It erodes love. It corrodes destiny. It sabotages profession. It fractures sovereignty. So a toxic marriage is not simply the failure of intimacy, advocate. It is the erosion of nationhood. And every citizen who rises from toxicity restores not only their own destiny, but the dignity of the continent.
Thank you, Professor. How can civic education and emotional intelligence be mobilized to prevent toxic unions before they begin?
Thank you, Advocate. Prevention is not accident, it is architecture. So toxic unions do not erupt overnight. They are seeded in ignorance, in silence, in myths unchallenged. To prevent them, we must mobilize two sovereign instruments, civic education and emotional intelligence. In terms of civic education, it must teach that marriage is not private indulgence. It is civic covenant. Citizens must be trained to recognize rights, responsibilities, and red lines. They must learn that dignity is non-negotiable, that oppression is not tradition, and that silence is complicity. Civic education arms the mind against the myths that glorify endurance over liberty. Then in terms of emotional intelligence, it must teach that love is not chaos, it is clarity. Citizens must be trained to name emotions, to resolve conflict without suppression, to distinguish care from control. Emotional literacy is the shield against manipulation, the compass against captivity. So, together, civic education and emotional intelligence, we say civic education builds the citizen, emotional intelligence builds the human. One protects sovereignty, the other protects intimacy. When fused, they create unions rooted in dignity, not decay. Thus, prevention is not passive, it is deliberate. It is the teaching of rights before vows, the cultivation of dignity before devotion, the training of sovereignty before intimacy. So, a nation that mobilizes civic education and emotional intelligence does not merely prevent toxic unions, it architects sovereign marriages that protect love, destiny, and profession.
Thank you, Professor. Finally, if you could issue one decree to all people trapped in toxic unions, what would it be?
Thank you, Advocate, for allowing me to issue a decree. My decree would be simple, sovereign, and uncompromising. Choose dignity over endurance, for captivity is not covenant, and silence is not love. This decree summons every citizen to remember, endurance without dignity is not strength, it is surrender. Silence in the face of oppression is not loyalty, it is complicity. Marriage without liberty is not union, it is captivity. To those trapped, the decree is not merely instruction, it is emancipation. It declares that living is not failure but sovereignty. It affirms that dignity is not negotiable but destiny. It reminds the continent that every liberated citizen is a liberated nation. For the decree is not just for the wounded, it is for the nation. A people who glorify dignity will never normalize oppression, and a continent that protects liberty will never yes captivity. Thank you, Advocate, for having me.
Thank you, President, for reframing toxic vows not as private burdens, but as fractures of professional dignity. Your insistence on sovereign exits reminds us that careers cannot survive where dignity is chained to corrosive intimacy. To our audience, if you're ready to liberate your professional clarity from toxic vows, reclaim dignity as your covenant, and design careers anchored in sovereign survival, Springfield Research University awaits you. Visit www.springfieldresearchuniversity.net and join the mission to structure survival with clarity. That brings us to the end of this diagnostic edition of Springfield Career Insights. May tonight's reflections provoke courage, liberation, and professional renewal. I am Clarence, your host. Good night.
Hey, hey, siyakubuka, tikiti lefu Tanzalunga kiwa. Hey, hey, siyakubuka, sonke siyavumelana, ngemjululo muhle sonke similela. Hey, hey, siyakubuka, tikiti lefu Tanzalunga kiwa. Hey, 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 siyakubuka, sonke siyavumelana, ngemjululo muhle sonke similela.
The Law Factor with Advocate Clarence Gandawa.
Greetings to you all. Today we are talking about marriage. Understanding marriage types. Marriage, a union forged in love, tradition, law, and responsibility. It is not merely the coming together of two souls, but the intertwining of futures, legacies, and legal bonds that will shape generations. Yet marriage is not one size fits all. It is as diverse as the people who enter it, each type carrying distinct implications that define rights, duties, and consequences. Civil marriage, a contract signed, witnessed, and recognized by the state. This is marriage as the law envisions it, clear, structured, offering full legal protections and obligations. The courts uphold it, the government regulates it, every asset shared, every decision joined, every dissolution under judicial scrutiny. Religious marriage. Beyond the law, there is faith. Religious marriage binds not only in love, but in sacred doctrine, where inheritance, divorce, and even obligations are shaped by spiritual commandments. The vows are spoken in temples, mosques, churches, sealed not just by witnesses, but by divine authority. Yet, faith and law do not always move in harmony. When disputes arise, which takes precedence, the scriptures or the courts? Customary law, a marriage rooted in heritage, culture, and ancestral traditions. It is the bond passed down through generations, recognized by communities, but often scrutinized by modern legal frameworks. Here, obligations extend beyond the couple, to families, to customs, to unwritten laws that govern how marriage functions within a lineage. But in an evolving legal world, is tradition enough? Common law marriage. No grand ceremony, no legal certificate, just time. Years spent together, building a life, sharing a home. This is a union defined by presence, not paperwork. But when it ends, what remains? Does love unrecognized by law still hold legal weight? Can property, finances, and obligations still be claimed? Arranged marriage. Not all marriages begin with romance. Some are decided by families, by cultures, by expectations. Arranged marriages carry the weight of tradition, the promise of security, and the hope of lasting commitment. But where is choice in obligation? Where is freedom in expectation? And when love is not the foundation, can trust truly grow? Contractual marriage. Marriage, negotiated, structured, signed like a business deal. Here, love may exist, but agreements reign supreme. Prenuptial clauses, financial agreements, predefined expectations. Some see it as protection, others as practicality. But is love bound by a contract still love, or is it merely an arrangement of convenience? 6 parts, 6 choices, 6 legal frameworks shaping the most profound union of human experience. But the question remains, are you prepared for the consequences of the marriage you choose? Love is powerful, but law is permanent. The decisions made today will echo for a lifetime. To be ignorant of marriage law is to step into a commitment blindfolded. But to understand it, to grasp the rights, responsibilities, and risks, is to enter marriage empowered. Before you say I do, ask yourself, do I understand the path I am about to take? The law moves forward, you must move with it. The advantages and disadvantages of marriage. Marriage, more than love, more than passion, is a commitment sealed by law, bound by responsibility, and shaped by circumstances, both expected and unforeseen. For every promise whispered beneath vows, there are realities that must be faced. Every union carries its advantages, yet no marriage is without sacrifice. Before stepping forward, one must ask, what do I stand to gain, and what will I leave behind? Legal security versus emotional flexibility. Marriage, in its most structured form, offers protection. contracts that ensure financial security, the right to shared property, the power to make critical decisions together. The state recognizes the bond, upholding rights when disputes arise. Yet, this security comes at a price. The spontaneity of emotional flexibility is often traded for structured responsibility. In the eyes of the law, love is not enough. Compliance, duty, and permanence take precedence. Financial stability versus possible restrictions. For many, marriage is a financial alliance, a partnership designed to pool resources, secure assets, and build a future fortified against uncertainty. A union of incomes, a safeguard against instability, yet where wealth is shared, so too are burdens, debts, liabilities, the decision of one affecting the prosperity of both. Marriage grants stability, but it also demands financial accountability, for better or for worse. Inheritance rights versus cultural obligations. A marriage is not just for the present, it is for generations to come. Wills, estates, legacies, these are not just words, they are the realities of life's eventual end. Through legal marriage, inheritance is secured, ensuring that wealth is passed as intended. Yet tradition often complicates what should be clear. In some cultures, expectations of extended family outweigh legal documents. In others, unwritten customs challenge statutory law. What should be certain becomes disputed, and what should be protected sometimes falls prey to societal pressures. To enter marriage blindly is to ignore the truths that shape its foundation. What is gained? What is lost? What price is paid for security, stability, and legacy? Love is powerful, but knowledge is crucial. Before stepping forward, one must weigh the choice, see beyond emotion, and understand. Once the vows are spoken, the path is set, the law moves forward, you must move with it. Property regimes and financial considerations. Marriage is a union of hearts, but it is also a merging of futures, of wealth, of liabilities. It is a partnership where love meets financial reality, where passion intersects with responsibility. Too often, couples step into marriage blinded by emotion, never pausing to ask what happens to our assets, what happens to our debts, what happens if the unexpected arrives. Separation, hardship, loss. Marriage in community of property. Two become one, not just in love, but in wealth, in obligations, in risk. Every asset shared, every debt entwined. What is yours becomes ours. What was separate now moves as a single estate. The advantages: stability, security, a clear division of rights under the law. But the risks: when one stumbles, both fall. If one accumulates debt, the other carries the burden. If one mismanages resources, both pay the price. Financial independence is lost, replaced by full reliance on shared responsibility. Marriage out of community of property. Some choose separation, not of love, but of finances. Here, each spouse retains their own assets, their own debts, their own control. Freedom from liability. Independence in financial decisions. But within this framework, there are choices. Without accrual, what you bring into the marriage remains yours. What you earn remains yours. No sharing, no joint claims, no automatic entitlements upon dissolution. Independence reigns, but security is minimal. With accrual, a balanced middle ground. What was yours before remains yours, but what is built together is shared. Growth is recognized, contributions weighed. When the union ends, the wealth accumulated is divided, not by sentiment, but by fairness. Prenuptial agreements, prenups. And then there are those who plan ahead, who choose clarity before commitment. A prenuptial agreement is not a lack of trust, it is a safeguard, a declaration of mutual understanding. A prenup protects assets, defines financial rights, prevents disputes before they arise. It removes uncertainty, replaces assumption with certainty, but not all see it this way. Some believe love should never be bound by legal terms. Yet, is it wisdom or doubt to protect one's future? The truth remains. Marriage is love, but it is also law. It is a legal contract, a financial alliance, a binding agreement between two people who must understand the path they choose. Too many enter marriage unprepared for its realities, unaware of its consequences. Too many stand in courtrooms, shocked, unprotected, regretting the choices they never made before the vows were spoken. This is the moment for clarity, the moment for foresight. Love is powerful, but knowledge secures the future. The law moves forward. Before you say I do, you must move with it. Marriage is more than love, more than commitment. It is a binding contract, a financial reality, a legal partnership. It determines not only the rights you hold today, but the responsibilities you will carry for a lifetime. And yet, too many step forward blindly, never pausing to ask the critical questions. Before you say I do, ask yourself, do I understand the legal framework that will govern my union? Have I considered the financial implications that could shape my future? Have I looked beyond emotion to see the reality of what marriage demands? Love may be the fire that sparks the journey, but wisdom must be the light that guides the path. Speak to legal experts. Know the law. Safeguard your rights before the vows are spoken. Marriage is not just an affair of the heart, it is an arrangement written in law, sealed by obligation, and once the choice is made, the consequences are set. You must take the time to make an informed decision, one rooted not just in love but in knowledge. Understand the legal framework that defines marriage. Discuss financial and property implications. Avoid surprises before they arise. Consider your values, your goals, and the foundation you are building. Seek counsel because in law, ignorance is not an excuse. Too many enter marriage unprepared. Too many learn too late that love without understanding can lead to hardship, conflict, and loss. Love should be celebrated, but wisdom must guide the commitment. Marriage does not wait for hesitation. The law does not bend to uncertainty. The future moves forward. You must move with it. Legal knowledge is power. Marriage is responsibility. Choose wisely. See you next Thursday.
Springfield Law Clinic, justice defined, rights protected. We are here to serve.